Tesseres.
Because we were just saying that this is the first time ever in our conference live that we are ahead of time and can start earlier. So, good morning. My name is Aleksandra Gliszczyńska-Grabias. I'm assistant professor of law at the Institute of Law Studies of the Polish Academy of Sciences. So the longest names ever of both my last name and the institution. And I come to the subject of SLAPPs from both perspectives, academically, but also as a member of defense teams in many SLAPP cases, mostly concerning litigation SLAPPs against scholars and Polish Holocaust scholars in particular, Holocaust historians. So I have been involved in this subject for years now, and for the last 8 years in particular. It was a very intensive and intense time when it comes to SLAPPs against public participation in academic debates over Holocaust and historical past in Poland. I have great pleasure to introduce the panelists on this second panel of our conference. So I will start with Matthew Caruana Galizia from Daphne Foundation. Matthew is a co-founder of the Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation, set up to pursue full justice for his mother, a journalist assassinated in a car bomb attack in Malta in 2017, and to bring about long-term positive change for journalism and transparency in Malta and the EU. We have Stevan Dojčinović. Stevan is an investigative reporter based in Belgrade. He works for the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project as a regional editor, and he's also editor-in-chief of the Serbian portal KRIK. He has specialized in investigating organized crime, corruption, and money laundering. He won numerous awards, including 2022 Anti-Corruption Champion Award, International 2018 Award for Outstanding Merits in Investigative Journalism, and 3 times the Serbian National Award for Investigative Reporting. We have also Rade Djuric with us, an expert in the field of budget spendings, the fight against corruption and media. And he is part of the Independent Journalists Association of Serbia team since 2020, and working in subjects such as freedom of information access, data protection, safety issues, media, finance protection of journalist sources, journalist safety, and SLAPPs. During his 16 years career, he was an associate of Transparency International Serbia, UN, OSCE, and Council of Europe. Today, as a member of the permanent working group for the journalist safety, he actively provides help and support to attack journalists and media workers. And we will also have with us, hopefully, Janos Mecs from Hungarian Civil Liberties Union, where he serves as an expert in political freedoms program. Janos is on his way on a train from Budapest. So we'll see how it goes and if it works. And we'll be, of course, really happy to have him among us here in the panel. So I would like to start with first 2 general questions that I would like to ask all of you, and we would have the round of answers, and of course feel free to react also towards what others have said. So I will start perhaps with a big question. So let's try to state where do we stand actually today in Europe when it comes to SLAPPs? what is their scale, their forms, the most important developments concerning this phenomenon, and also seen from the broader perspective of the global free speech recession that we can observe in many places in the world, but also in the context of things happening in Europe, not only the directive that has just been signed and is going to be implemented in member states, but also the approaching European Parliament elections, and something that I would also call still unstable situation within many European states, not only Central and Eastern European states as we used to claim for many years now. So let's start with Matthew.
Hi everyone, good morning. The foundation that I set up with my family that you kindly introduced has been running since 2018, since just a couple of months after my mom's assassination. And at the time we were handling all the defamation cases that my family had inherited that were mentioned earlier. There were more than 40 of them in total. We started to realize that it's a European problem, that there are many other journalists around Europe who are in a similar situation. My mom's case was among the most egregious. But when we started to do research, yes, we realized that there are so many other journalists and media organizations around Europe that are in the same position, except that there wasn't a name for this kind of condition that we were in. And David, yes, earlier asked who invented the term SLAPPs. I don't know who that is myself, but right after the murder, we realized that in the US, this is the term that is used. So with other press freedom organizations in Europe, we set about trying to popularize it, I guess you could say, introducing the concept to members of the European Parliament, and they were then able to call on the Commission to do something about it. That happened eventually. I was very happy to see. But since then, our work hasn't stopped. The foundation is involved in CASE, the Coalition Against SLAPPs in Europe, and one of the most important things that we do as part of that coalition is collect information from as many journalists, academics, activists as possible. So I'm always soliciting cases from people, getting them to open up about the cases that they're dealing with, which is often a source of shame, even though it shouldn't be. So people are unwilling to talk about how they're being sued, threatened with lawsuits, and so on. They're afraid it might be seen as a signal that they are doing journalism badly. But I always emphasize that it's the opposite case. Our data is showing that the better the journalism, the more likely you are to be targeted with SLAPP cases. The vast majority of the activists, academics, journalists that we assist in their journalism when they are faced with SLAPP cases are actually doing their work really professionally. They're collaborating, dealing with matters of huge public interest, but they are, we see, more exposed to these kinds of cases. And I believe that this is the situation in Poland, where despite being extremely professional, media organizations are still being faced with these kinds of SLAPPs. So the stigma is really wrong, I believe. The data shows, from what we've collected, that the problem is growing year on year. Every year, the number of cases that we track, that we get information on, increases. You get really extreme cases where you'll have single journalists who are targeted, but with many SLAPP cases by one individual or by a group of individuals working together. This was the situation with my mom, where it was actually a small number of people in business and politics that were throwing case after case against her. And the same thing is happening in other countries. I guess this is the inspiration for what Case, the Coalition Against SLAPPs in Europe, calls the Gallery of Shame, where we really focus attention on the kind of worst offenders in the SLAPP context. And I think that's a really effective way of campaigning against it, because we need to be able to show that this coalition is fighting back against this abuse of the law.
Hi. As I said, I work for this big international network of journalists, OCCRP, which is now actually global. So literally OCCRP now works in every continent. So we collect different experience of journalists being under pressure from around the world. And of course, many countries different. So it's not everywhere the same, but what we can say that basically SLAPP definitely become in last years like the main tool of trying to put pressure and silencing journalists, no matter in which part of the world we are. So basically this has become very popular, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. Globally, basically. So it's not just, of course, European problem. And now the difference is, of course, which countries we talk about. So yes, in the countries where there is a strong rule of law, the SLAPP is mainly there to, as we heard from previous speaker, there to basically put pressure on journalists, not with strong intention that you can basically win, because most of these SLAPP lawsuits in the end are like baseless lawsuits that cannot go. But also we have other countries which we should not forget, which is mostly outside of the Europe, where we don't have a rule of law, and that is the deadly mix. And even some countries in Europe, like Serbia, I'm from Serbia, because in these countries you also can win with SLAPP case, which kind of put you in a bad position. Like in Serbia, we lost basically on the first instance, for instance, 3 cases, which later I can explain. So basically, that's different. But SLAPP itself, it becomes kind of the main tool. Of course, there's still threats on journalists. There's murders, unfortunately, on journalists. But somehow, these things, I think, for the guys who are, let's say, targets of investigation of journalists, it become very costly and very risky to go. So it's kind of, all of them understand that basically SLAPP is kind of the main tool to really drain journalism out of the money, out of the time, to put them in some kind of bureaucracy, and to really become the main tool. And what is important to look, the SLAPP, you cannot just look as a SLAPP as isolated thing, right? Usually the SLAPP will happening with other moves done against the journalists in the same time. So usually what will happen, there'll be like SLAPPs. Usually SLAPPs will be also followed with smear campaigns that will go against journalists who are SLAPP through the media who are controlled by the bad guys. It could be governments or oligarchs. And usually also will be followed by attacks of internet bots, internet trolls on the social media. So the journalist, just beside being like threatened or sued, or there will be criminal proceeding against him, he'll be also splashed with attacks coming from media, from the social media and so on. So the SLAPP happens in this whole environment, and it should be kind of understand to fight it back. One layer is to find it basically in the courtroom, right, where you're sued, but also you need to fight it outside of the courtroom. So which means that besides having good lawyers and financial to go through the court, the journalists need to have good strategies what to do outside of the court. And many times this is connected. Many times, for instance, what happens outside of the courtroom can be used against you in the court, but also otherwise you can use a lot of things to be in advance in the courtroom. Regarding like the first problem was always for many journalists, especially for the small newsrooms working in the towns, so usually outside of the capital. The main problem is, of course, do they have enough the budget and financial means to defend themselves? Luckily, there's a lot of good initiatives now who are helping, and maybe the best one out there, pretty new initiative, it's called Reporters Shield. Since I see the channel here, I think we will hear maybe later more about it, but this is really good project. Let's say it's some sort of international insurance company, let's call it, or something like that. Basically, you as a media, you can pay the fee, certain fee, and then if you get sued, this initiative basically will support all the costs that you have, and it kind of solves this problem for many media. Of course, when you apply to Reporter Shield, you go through some process where they will check if your reporter is good enough, if you're good as a media, like professional, to support you. So this is kind of this is good initiative, and there's a lot of also luckily there's a lot of like donors who also help journalists in financial terms. Like we were managed to fundraise a lot of money in Serbia, because I'm also editor of web portal Creek in Serbia, to support our defense. I think journalization, NUNS, Rade is working with them, help us with one of the case. Also, I see many of you actually who are sitting here actually help us one way or another to support some cases. So there is some financial support, that's a good thing, but that's not completely solving the problem. So there's a lot of also to deal with outside of the fighting inside of the courtroom. And what is missing there, and I'll finish, maybe I'm too long, it's like kind of, I think that media itself, first of all, need to have some new strategies which will they basically apply to be more resilient when they're facing with the SLAPP, which are mostly connected to their standards, professional, but also strategies how to fight all of these things that basically I'll explain, which are happening outside of the courtroom. Like, for instance, like in many cases, the persons, and we had one of these cases actually in OCCRP when we were being sued in London, which was very, very traumatic case for organization, of course, where basically one oligarch from for one Eastern country, from Azerbaijan actually, oligarch, basically he didn't sue for the story, but he sued our Paul Radu, who's one of the top people in OCCRP, because of his tweet. So basically, he tweeted the story. He was not even author of the story. So basically, he sued him in London over this tweet because he found this as more vulnerable to basically sue him there. So I'm just saying, like a lot of the things that actually happening around also can help these people to basically win against journalists, but also things that are happening around, also it can also help journalists to win in the courtroom. Like in Serbia, I'll just mention what we do. We're trying to always go public with the cases who are against us. So this is not recommended for every country, but in some countries it's really good that if you're under SLAPP to really go vocal and public about it. So in Serbia, for instance, in Serbia, we report about SLAPP cases, and we see benefit from it, because we put more light on these cases. But also what we start doing we start bringing international observers inside of the courtrooms, which is also really efficient, especially in the countries, like I said, that has problems with rule of law. It's really important, and where there's a lot of judges under political influence or corrupt, it's really important to bring somebody outside to come there. And I think now we agree with UN office in Serbia. Basically, they will be giving us observers for each of the. No, so I mean, not to go in more details, but that's it. I'm saying it's not just enough to have financial support in fighting the courtroom. There's to create a lot of strategies. What also you need to do in order to help yourself to win in a case. Sorry, maybe I went over the time.
Okay, thank you very much on this kind of introduction, first of all. And as I would like to refer to Matthew and actually Stevan regarding the complete situation. In general, it's not good because we have a raising of all kind of SLAPP lawsuits in almost every country in Europe, especially in this eastern part of Europe. And as Matthew said, actually depend on different kind of judiciary system and criminal justice system who can actually recognize and how they practically can react regarding these lawsuits. And I would refer to Stevan, and SLAPP is actually only the one part of the threat mechanism, complete mechanism, and even connected with more obvious and more important and much more danger safety issues, which actually we unfortunately saw. And this is more than obvious, especially in Eastern countries, and as maybe I think that Stevan already mentioned, you mentioned case from Azerbaijan, but we need to mention, for example, case from Serbia, where CRIC was actually filed a suit against CRIC because of publication of information from public hearing, not some investigative story. Then, you know, like you receive some kind of insults or something like that, like any kind of damage. It was a publication based on what a public prosecutor actually stated during the hearing. But I want to back on the beginning of your question, actually, regarding the directive. As a lawyer, strategically, it is very important to have it. It's a big step, official recognition and determining the possibility or possible responsibility of those who submit these kind of lawsuits. And this directive should basically, in practice, neutralize the plaintiffs, but it should have a kind of raising effect on those who abuse this kind of legal right to file a lawsuit. And because having that kind of regulation is actually gives a completely different picture on the whole problem. And on the other hand, for me, even personally, it's very important to have a kind of how to say, a small kind of pressure even on judges, because it's not important what we have in laws, it's very important how judges actually react, because at this point, whole pressure is actually on them, how they react, and because they actually produce new practice, and they produce possible new cases of potential lawsuits. How they react, that would actually affect on potential plaintiffs. Yeah.
Very important with the implementation.
Yes, especially as a very important. And on the other hand, it's very important to continue to work on other regulations, on some specific, at this moment, present situation. We have some negative effects on other regulations, and it's very important to be aligned with SLAPP directive, new SLAPP regulation. And I suppose it won't be a kind of easy process, and there will be a kind of huge resistance because you have, you know, like you have criminal codes, you have some specific laws which are already recognized for 50 or something more, 70 years regarding Europe legal acquis, actually. And you have also mentioned the political situation, maybe the relation with Parliament. It seems to me that it was very important that the directive was passed in this convocation of the EU Parliament. I'm not sure how politically and socially it would be possible in new convocation of Parliament, because it's my personal opinion, but obviously we can see that we have slightly changes. We would possibly have more like right-wing representation in EU Parliament, and regarding that we would probably have completely different approach regarding this liberal kind of regulation. Regarding the countries we are coming actually from, it's very hard situation, and on the other hand, this directive is not directly approach and regulate the laws in, for example, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, or I don't know, Macedonia, Montenegro, but we, as we needed to align with other sectors, for example, public procurement or free access to information, we would need to align with this directive, and this process would be probably painful and very slow. However, the problem in our countries, we actually have an excellent laws, and Stevan knows that, and we already spoke about it. The biggest problem is that socio-political context and how the, especially executive power, who had actually huge influence on judiciary, on prosecutors, on judges, on police, how they understand and are they actually enough pressured to implement it? Because they're actually, how to say, opportunists. Actually, they're using every possible situation to implement everything they can, but to switch the complete situation and try to use it for their, actually, interests. And actually, that's the problem with huge problem with Balkan, especially Balkan countries and the region. And we saw and we see Balkan countries as probably the biggest issue, biggest problem today in Europe. And because of that, I'm very afraid of application of any new law, or I understand directive. We have much bigger problems at this moment with other directives, and this directive would approach at some point, at some period of time. And because judicial, they are under the huge influence of the executive judges. For example, I understand for prosecutors or police officers, they're directly involved regarding the new election of them. But on the other hand, sometimes I understand or do not understand about the judges. They're completely free to decide. But there are other types of pressures in the life, especially on jobs of their families, of their relatives, their friends, or for example, in any time of life, you will need to go to the hospital. Then you will see how they approach to you, because you were something as independent judge. And that's why it's very important still to remove the effects of existing laws, negative practice, and that create the climate fear around the media reporting and certain topics. But we need we actually need to see how would it implement in European countries, especially in some specific countries we are actually using as a kind of example, not only in the region of Balkan, maybe some specific countries in Europe. So today it's I will finish with this. It is strategically very important. It's an excellent thing. It gives you a completely different approach and opportunity to fight, actually. And as the previous speakers said, not only lawsuit, threat to suit everyone. So I think we can see only some positive measures and things.
Thank you. It seems that it all gets, in the end, or at the beginning, to the rule of law, right? And how it functions. And then the other aspects come into scene, into play. So our panel is about case studies in particular. So I wanted to ask you, on the basis of your enormous experience with SLAPPs, if you can perhaps share with us an example of a SLAPP that you remember well or best, the SLAPP that perhaps brought the most profound consequences, or there was a really severe chilling effect caused by the SLAPP, or perhaps a SLAPP that ended up with on a positive note, with important victory for media and journalist freedom. Okay.
So historically, in Malta, SLAPP cases have come with warrants of prohibitory injunction or garnishee orders or something like that. So the claimant would, before the case has even started, but as soon as the lawsuit is filed, also apply to the court for an injunction preventing, for example, the respondent from transferring their assets, or a garnishee order, which would come after the judgment, which would instruct the bank to direct a portion of the respondent's revenue to the claimant. And I remember these being used extensively when I was growing up, where cases would be filed against my mother and there would be a garnishee order on her bank account, for example. A part of her salary would be frozen in the favor of the claimant. But the worst case ever of these was in 2017, just a couple of months before my mom was murdered. It was actually just a really funny story where the Minister of the Economy in Malta was invited by the German government on a trip to somewhere near Düsseldorf, if I remember well, for a conference on sort of German businesses or something like that. And my mother received a phone call from someone that she knew sort of from her neighborhood where she grew up, saying, listen, I'm so-and-so, you know me. At this moment, I'm at a brothel in this small town in Germany, and you're not going to believe this, but the Minister of the Economy is standing right next to me, almost naked, just wearing a towel around his waist, and he just walked into a room with one of the women working here. So my mother, after sort of, you know, really confirming with this person, sent me photos from inside, tell me exactly how the place looks. Does he have a tattoo on his shoulder? And yes, he did. He had a tattoo of Che Guevara, which very people knew about. So it was kind of fully confirmed, right? And he was there with his assistant as well, and my mother confirmed the assistant's identity also. So she just went ahead and published this, you know, as a thinking it was just something funny, you know, people would laugh at it and that's it. The story would end there. But instead what happened is that the economy minister came right back to Malta on the next flight out. With his assistant, they filed 4 cases against my mom, in each case claiming, if I remember well, 11,000 euros. And they also got a warrant, an injunction, freezing my mother's bank accounts up to the value that they were claiming, so just over 40,000 euros. While my mom had been sued many times, you know, this wasn't the first time. This was for me the most shocking and the one that carried the biggest negative effect, I would say. Because my mom was unable to run her business, unable to pay for anything. All her money was completely frozen. My dad had to kind of sign blank checks just so she could buy fuel for her car and so on. But the minister just persisted. I mean, he was unwilling to drop the injunction. And it just continued like that right up until my mom was murdered. So she died with her bank accounts being frozen. But one positive thing to come out of this was, one, it inspired us to start campaigning for changes across the EU. But also, I could see how much public support there was for journalists like my mother. Within 24 hours, around 60,000 euros was raised by someone who started a crowdfunding campaign to pay for the legal costs. So it was really nice to see that huge public support. So in one way it was the worst case, and in another way it was the best one.
I can go quickly through 3 cases. Very briefly, because one case shows one dangerous, let's say, new thing that is happening. Second, I'll tell one brief funny case. And third, with positive example, like you asked. So, yes, so briefly, like this new tendency that we see, it's one of the cases that we have active case in Switzerland. Against OCCRP reporter, OCCRP editor-in-chief at that time, Drew Sullivan, and OCCRP as a company, as an organization. The case is filled by one Serbian, how to call him, controversial businessman. This is the word we for these guys who are, yeah. Basically, why this case is important, and this is one of the very stressful cases we have now, it's that basically, because he had dual citizenship, also Swiss one, allow him to actually choose in which country he's going to sue us. And this is kind of also new tendencies called like liberal tourism or like closer tourism, but basically individuals are allowed to choose country which they think they will have better chances to fulfill the SLAPP. And what is interesting, the story was just published in English on OCCRP website, so it's not in the French. And still he sues us in Switzerland because what we figure out is that being a Swiss citizen, you can sue on the basis that you're basically citizen and you don't need to follow exactly the language of the publication of the story. So this is pretty kind of a wild case that is still ongoing. So basically these powerful actors who have enough money to buy different citizenship, they can basically also choose the country. And this is also something should be addressed and kind of stopped. Funny case is, basically the funny case was, it's a case from the Serbia. So in Serbia, we have been sued mostly by state actors, like chief of the Secret Service, police people, people from the government, so literally people from government. So in this, it's also some organized crime figures and so on. But what really interesting case was that there was the lawsuit we had filed by chiefs of one police department that deals with protection of the witnesses. And the story is funny. It's like, so we did the story, briefly, the story was based on whistleblowers from this department who leaked us some files who showed that this department doesn't effectively give protection to protected witnesses. That was the story about. So we published the story, and then the chief of this department and his assistants, they filed the SLAPP lawsuit. But what the funniest case is that so we publish, like I said, we always go like very pretty much public about everything. So you just publish really small brief news that this chief of this police department submit a SLAPP lawsuit against us. And then he sues us for this brief news because we call it SLAPP lawsuit. So this is basically sue us. But what is interesting, in the end, this first case with whistleblower, this big case, we actually won in the court. So it's now the final decision, where basically they rejected his lawsuit, which means basically it was baseless and it was a SLAPP. But we lost this other case that we call it a SLAPP lawsuit, still on the first instance. It's pretty funny and, I mean, not so funny, but it's pretty wild. So we basically lost this second, which shows what Rade was telling, like, it's really important what kind of judge is actually involved in this case. Maybe Rade can get more details about this. And the last case, which is a good example, I will briefly go it, where we show what I was speaking later, how like it's things strategies you actually impose in the courtroom and outside of the courtroom can actually help is the case we had when one minister in Serbia, very pro-Russian minister, it's called Nenad Popović. He was minister for innovation in government, right? So he filed which is really weird, for one story we published on him, and story was part of the Project Paradise paper where we exposed some of his hidden offshore companies. He filed 4 lawsuits for the same story, which was a really unique case, and it was accepted in the court. So they opened 4 parallel, basically, trials against Krik in Serbia for this. And he was the very powerful minister, and we understood that it was not enough maybe just fighting through court. We need to have some good strategies what to do. So what we did, we were also very like vocal about it and so on. But one really interesting thing we did, it actually helped us to win this, was actually that since in Serbia it's very hard, FOIA request doesn't work so much anymore, so it's really hard to get any documents, information public from the government. And since he was the minister, since the story was about his wealth, because we discovered a couple of offshore companies there, we said, okay, let's actually, since he sued us, let's put him in the most uncomfortable position for him. So let's try to use the court case itself to dig more about his basically wealth. So we asked, instead of the court, since the whole case is about, he said, I didn't own the offshore companies, I don't have so much money. So we said, we asked the court, we asked in all of these 4 cases, because we knew that at least one of the judges will be good. So not all judges are corrupt. That only will have at least, since he sued us 4 times, we have big chances to find at least one judges who will help us in this. So we ask in the court to court ask all the state institution, all the ministry, anti-corruption agency, all institution, to give inside of the court everything what this institution have about his wealth. And exactly, there was one good judge who actually accepted. So now in the court start coming a lot of files. So we discovered he had really expensive paintings, some amounts of his bank accounts. So we got really huge insight of his wealth, thanks to his suing us. And on top of that, he basically decided in one moment, so he just kind of, withdraw the lawsuits. So he just give up. So basically, we used court case itself to actually further investigate these guys. And so basically, this kind of strategy actually helped us in this case. So this will be a good example. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I would refer, first of all, a few sentences regarding how Serbian judges and judiciary actually understand the SLAPP lawsuits, because these decisions are completely different and completely crazy at the moment. And actually, they have several specific considerations when resolving SLAPP lawsuits. First principle is that they do not recognize or do not allow the word SLAPP. When they on their hearings, they do not accept on court hearings when to even mention strategic litigation against public participation, or even mention SLAPP lawsuits, because their explanation is that Serbian judiciary system and laws do not recognize officially, which is not completely true, because we are pretty aware that we need to involve European courts' decisions, actually. So it's technically, at that moment, it became the part of Serbian judicial system. But on the other hand, you have some specific individual judge who decide what to do. On the other hand, that other principle, for example, when Stevan wrote about SLAPP lawsuit and how someone suited him, actually, because of he mentioned in his investigative text or article, even in I don't know, like news or public announcement, anything about SLAPP lawsuits. At that point and that moment, they recognize SLAPP. They understand it as a kind of negative speech, which would influence and insult, possibly, the plaintiff, actually. And especially in Greek case, the team of plaintiffs it's so wide. At some point it's almost unbelievable. You have some ministries, you have people in power, very, very important people. You have people from police, from, I don't know, maybe even judiciary, or complete system which heavily influence on the life actually in Serbia. And that's the problem with Greek. At this moment, Greek, I think, have 22 lawsuits. At this moment, 13 lawsuits. And in previous period before 2021, they had 8 cases. At this moment, they have 13. I think one was successfully in the favor of Greek. It was yesterday or the day before, actually. So at this moment, Greek has the biggest problem with lawsuits. And comparing them, I wanted to talk more maybe about some specific case from some local municipality and small local portal from South Serbia. It is portal Jug Press, and journalist Ljiljana, she's editor-in-chief, Ljiljana Stojanović, and obviously that small portal has a huge influence not only in the region, not only in Serbia, but and in the region, in Kosovo, in Macedonia, and even a bigger part of Serbia, actually. And she was actually filed lawsuit against her because of publication of what she heard on public conference of some opposition leader. and not only her media was suited, few media too was actually filed by a lawsuit, but at the same happening, at the same press conference, I think there was at least 10 or 15 other local medias. No one was actually filed by a lawsuit, only Yuk Press. And Yuk Press was filed with two lawsuits. First one was against the Yuk Press because of it was a problem of damage of the business reputation by the publication of unauthorized information and false information. Of course, that was not true. And the first request was 100,000 euros. After the huge pressure of the publicity, it was reduced on 100 euros, which is obviously a kind of a regular example of the SLAPP. The other lawsuit was directly against editor-in-chief, Ljiljana Stojanović, and because of, and the owners of that Millennium Group firm were filed a lawsuit, and they were said that it was because of she produced mental pain, actually. And the first lawsuit was dismissed. The second one is still ongoing, still on the process, and was the problem actually with the plaintiff. The Millennium team is a company that is probably, let's be precise because I'm a lawyer, probably connected with high-ranking representatives and officials, and it is considered that official owners work actually for someone. We don't know for who, but it's very then obvious that that group, Millennium Group, receive important investment and very important jobs in Serbia, and they would probably involved in this Expo 2027 process, which is billions and billions of actually euros. And at this point, Serbia is the center of any kind of construction and investment. It's actually huge businesses. And what I actually want to, why I want to mention this case, it's at the beginning, when you first asked me, I was referring on the Stevan. This is a kind of only part of threat mechanism. SLAPP is only the part. Ljiljana Stojanović and Yuk Press, they suffers numerous pressures and threats beside this SLAPP lawsuit. And for example, judiciary system and court system in Serbia refers that when you file a lawsuit against someone regarding the media law, and most of these lawsuits are actually regarding the media laws, which law? Okay, law on public information and media. Actually, you need to come to hearing to High Court in Belgrade. For example, she lives in city of Leskovac. It's actually 400, 500 kilometers from Belgrade. And whenever she comes, no one of plaintiffs are not on the hearing. And always, yeah. So it's kind of huge pressure. You need to pay a huge tax. For example, when you saw 100,000 euros, this is a small media with 2 or 3 journalists who are actually working, and it's a huge influence on her work. It's a huge kind of pressure, primary, secondary victimization. On the other hand, I wanted to connect and mention with specific cases of threat that at the same time Yuk Press and Ljiljana actually received, because as you know, we have a standing working group system and safety mechanism of journalist safety system in Serbia, and this journalist, Ljiljana, she's a part of this standing working group. And 2 years ago, I think 6 months or 1 year after this lawsuit, it was a kind of threat from huge, I could say it's not people of influence, it's a warlord, actually. Local warlord and business magnate and someone who owns more than 30, 40 casinos or something, and has a huge connections with high representative officials. He actually threatened to some radio. So we, as a standing working group, we came there. And at some point, on some hearing, that guy, intentionally or not, publicly threatened to this journalist, Ljiljana Stojanović. So after that, 2.5 years of police protection he actually has. And finally, we found that he's pretty much good connection with Millennium Group firms, actually. They're very good friends. They probably work together. And I think this is a kind of example of huge type of pressure, which, I don't know, SLAPP is 1/4 of complete pressure. And it's always, as Stevan mentioned, it's always continuous with some campaigns on social networks, even with some direct threats or with some physical threat. And not only the first time, and then Ljiljana was few times before threatened directly, physically. So I can imagine how is to live under the police protection. It's really huge problem. And it's not even the case when she asked for protection. Police recognized that she's in huge problem. And it really affects on her life, on the life of her daughter, her son, and of course, this is not such a huge and important case as we had in Malta, and that's unbelievable. But all of us actually hope that we can prevent it, and the public prosecutors and police officers are understand and aware that something very negative and very, how to say, very hard could happen, actually. And then that's the reason why all of us need to protect. Of course, Ljiljana has protection from our side. She has lawyers. She has money amount regarding the taxes, and but it's not enough, actually. It's definitely not enough.
Thank you very much. Janos, we are talking about SLAPPs. Okay?
Yeah, right.
So,
I'm in the good panel then.
So I will get to the last part of the last series of questions that I have prepared for individually to all panel members, to each of panel members. So I wanted to ask you, because we have recently heard about significant protests in Hungary, and of course we observed it and watched it with excitement, and we were glad that they are taking place. But could you share with us if there is such a context, if there is a free media context within these protests that are taking place or have taken place, and including SLAPPs. So how the SLAPPs added in Hungary to the general decline of media freedom?
Yeah, thank you very much. Originally, I planned to speak about some GDPR-based SLAPPs, but of course we can tackle this issue as well, because yes, there are ongoing protests now in Hungary. And of course, the general media situation affects this quite, because as we can see, there was a media empire built up by the governmental parties, and the media, including the public media, who belong to that group, they don't even report, or they report on false information about the protests, but as I can see, we cannot really see any wide SLAPPs regarding the free media reporting on these events, and another interesting fact is that, for example, libel has been decriminalized in Hungary last year, and presumably it was because the governmental media spread some false information that fell under libel, and I think that was the best advocacy of decriminalizing it, because the governmental media itself encountered this kind of restrictions. So I wouldn't say that SLAPPs per se have direct effect now on these protests. However, we have some ongoing trends related to GDPR related SLAPPs.
Please feel free to address this. Yeah.
Okay. Because I think maybe that's interesting, and that's a special kind of SLAPP. So a GDPR-based SLAPP is it's basically a litigation that is not based on the classical routes of stifling the press, but it's based on the data processing, so that the slapper argues that the media should not handle the data, or even he argues that yes, the media might handle the data, but it did not observe the requirements based on GDPR. And basically the roots of the problem is that there's a section in GDPR that makes it possible for the member states to reconcile data protection and freedom of expression, but Hungary did not enact any special law on this. And that means that if I'm a journalist and I write an article, then maybe if I write about the third wealthiest person in Hungary, I use his name, and his name is a personal data. I write down that he has this and that company, and this is a personal data. And I should make a preliminary balancing test. I should document it, and I should inform him beforehand. And basically, I think the most exciting example is the Barabás family in Hungary. They are a soft drink manufacturers, and they are one of the wealthiest families in Hungary. And the Forbes Hungary usually every year puts together a list of the wealthiest families, wealthiest Hungarian persons, and the Barabás family was on this list with a really short entry. So that was their name, and then they owned the Hal company, which is this soft drink producer company. And the Barabás family initiated multiple legal proceedings, a special data protection proceeding, a civil law proceeding based on that their personal right of data protection has been violated, and there were some interim measures. So basically, the article or that part of the entry had to be taken down. So that was really a widespread SLAPP, and they initiated proceedings against other media outlets and the press. And what is surprising that they won many of these cases, and basically the courts in Hungary framed this issue, which is of course a fundamental issue, that how you reconcile the operations of the press and data protection, but they framed it solely as a data protection case. And then they ignored the fact that it was a press organ at hand, and that it was a public figure, because it's not an obvious thing that how doctrinally how public figure, the notion of public figure, which has a well-established case law in Hungary regarding the classic cases, the classic litigations, how it can be transformed into data protection cases. And basically, I don't want to go into the details of the GDPR, but the main thing is that if you are handling data, you might have two legal basis for that. If you are the press, you might have the legal basis of public interest, because you work for the public interest, or you might have your interest. But if you have your interest, then you have this very broad administrative burden on yourself. And basically all the courts said that putting together a list of the wealthiest people in Hungary, it doesn't involve any public interest at all, and so the other legal basis applies, and that's why that's why Forbes lost many of the cases, and some of these cases are before the European Court of Human Rights now. And maybe just one last funny thing about it, that the tide seemed to be changing last year, because we have won in another case in the autumn, and there was a civil litigation stream in this Barabás case, and we managed to win that as well in March. And the Forbes, who was sued, the Forbes published an article that, yeah, we won the battle against the Barabás family, and the Barabás family initiated again proceedings because of that article. So basically reporting on a SLAPP was slapped as well. So it's quite meta now in in Hungary. And one other thing is that my organization, the Hungarian Civil Liberties Union, we also reported on this that, yeah, that's great, the case law might be turning towards a more a press-friendly avenue, and Hungarian Civil Liberties Union was also slapped. So we are a bit overwhelmed now by this thing, but that shows that, and it's not. I mean, this was one case, but we conducted some research within the Hungarian press organs, and it's really a trend now in Hungary, and many wealthy and influential persons, often linked directly to the government, use this now as a tool of intimidating and harassing the press, and now rumor has it that nobody really dares to write about the Barabás family, because nobody wants to engage in a long and costly and burdensome litigation, which you don't know if you're going to win it or not.
Thank you. Interesting, because normally people tend to want to be included on the Forbes list, right? So, but perhaps there are good reasons not to be seen there in some cases. But also very interesting about this libel decriminalization, this development. We have been fighting for this for years here. Haven't managed it yet, and perhaps this is true. What some say, that Prime Minister Orban at some point knows what to do. You know, in crucial, important issues at hand, or he steps back when it's needed, like the strategy and strategic thinking. This is what some claim. Okay, so I have a question to Matthew specifically. So in one of your tweets from 2020, you wrote, and I quote, "12 years ago today, my mother asked me if I wanted to help her set up her website. I canceled my plans for the day and installed WordPress on a server in her office. Her work, that website, is still changing our country and changing Europe. So I wanted to ask you, how would you describe the most significant milestones of this change that happened in Malta since this event?"
In Malta itself, I think what it did was inspire or push international bodies, international institutions to change the way they deal with countries like Malta. It brought a focus on the country for sure, but afterwards, you know, whereas the OSCE, for example, representative on media freedom, was quite soft on Malta, then the tone changed, and they were able to push Malta to remove criminal defamation from the law, to remove the ability to file injunctions in defamation cases that would freeze assets. So there have been those changes which have been brought about, but many recommendations from the public inquiry that followed my mom's assassination have not been implemented by the government. I mean, we already said on this panel that there's a very tight link with the overall rule of law in the country. So there are a lot of other things a lot of other laws that have to be implemented that have been on the books, but which haven't been taken seriously. That would bring the country more in line with sort of norms of the European Union, let's say. But the attitude of judges and magistrates has also changed. For example, in 2006, my house was attacked. I mean, a group of neo-Nazis attacked the house. And our lawyers in that case requested that evidence from cell towers be produced in the case, but the judge denied the request. Then many years later, in this case I mentioned from 2017 of the minister at the brothel, our lawyer, again, who's a very creative person, requested that cell tower records be obtained from Germany. And at that point, the minister basically stopped turning up in court, and the case was dropped because they were so afraid of this evidence being produced once the judge had agreed. So I do think that attitudes are changing within the judiciary, but of course we still have a long way to go. I also want to mention that I have really grown to like working with lawyers. I spend more than half my time doing that. Like around 70% of my time is spent working with lawyers. And I've just come to realize how important their work is, how important it is to have good lawyers, that they are paid for their work. So I also have to thank the organizations like ECPMF, where Flutura works, Free Press Unlimited, Article 19, that provide financing during litigation. They support the work of lawyers. This is so important. It's really indispensable. Otherwise, we would have lost many cases.
Name of the lawyers, thank you very much. Stevan, preparing to this panel, I read somewhere, and I quote again, "Stevan is truly one of the best investigative journalists anywhere." So taking from this privilege, well, it's a secret source. So having this chance of having you here among us today, I wanted to ask exactly about the condition of investigative journalism, which is the backbone of safeguarding democracy in general, but in this SLAPP-related context. So are there any specific changes to be observed today in Europe concerning investigative journalism as such?
Relating to SLAPP, right? So, I mean, so everybody now has big, let's say, expectation with the new regulations that are coming, that SLAPP is finally addressed in Europe. Look, so we still need to see how it will work, because, like we talked, also depends on the local judges and judiciaries on each of the countries, how the judges are basically ready to kind of deal with this problem. So, from this point, this is already addressed. Also, from financial side of the things, also, like I said, there's really good now initiatives, like I mentioned, Reporter Shield, also others who support, like also Case Coalition also helped in many cases. So there is financial also support to the journalists to defend themselves. So this is also kind of there. So the last thing, what is still missing, also is kind of to prepare better the media itself and the newsrooms, how to deal basically. So there must be better strategies on like newsroom levels, how to recognize potential like SLAPP threat, and how to deal with the specific elements of this whole process, like what to do from the first beginning when they get a letter from lawyer threatening to sue, you know, and so it's basically. This is kind of field where it's important to work more, and we, as OCCRP, actually we work with also with journalists and media to get them better prepared. Where we also try to recognize what, for instance, it's important for judges inside of the court and to kind of adjust your reporting more to be kind of more bulletproof for this. For instance, like for judges, it's really important how much space you give to these people about who you write to respond to your claims. So if you find out that, for instance, like 2 weeks of time to giving them when you investigate the story, it's pretty much give you kind of really good arguments tomorrow in the courtroom. So I'm talking about, there's a lot of elements, like what to do when you receive, it's really important this moment when you receive like letter with a threat, how you're gonna react on it, you know? Many times this letter are there to provoke you, and so you give them more material to build a better lawsuit against you. So this is the thing. Is like, so basically, I think it's now more important to now actually, in one more end, to work with the judges, which is not my field to do, to actually better recognize the SLAPPs. Like Rade said, many judges will not, still not recognize SLAPP as a concept at all. But on my side, as a journalist, I think we should be more work with the newsroom itself to be better prepared for this whole thing.
Thank you. And Rade, I wanted to ask you, because you were also the member of the working group for the development of a platform for recording threats and pressures, right? Very long name.
Yeah.
So concentrating on these threats and pressures, I was wondering if perhaps you could share with us your ideas about what are the elements, the aspects that can actually stop these actors who threat and pressure and initiate SLAPPs from doing so. So what is most effective as a kind of deterrence against these threats and pressures?
Yeah, thanks. An excellent question, but I need to first refer regarding the group because we have actually at this moment we had 3 groups, 3 special groups regarding the safety issues on different levels. First one was with prosecutors, police officers, and representatives of journalist associations. Journalists, some of them weren't journalists. For example, I'm a member of that one. Then we had a group, similar group, not like standing working group, permanent working group, but a working group established by Serbian Prime Minister regarding the potential and possibilities to help from executive part of the, because we, at some point we realized that this group with prosecutors and police officers is actually limited on misdemeanors and criminal charges actually. And we saw and state accept that the huge problem is regarding the influence of executive power, high representatives. So as I said at the beginning, they are opportunists. They are taking all possible chances to produce something, but without some specific result. The third group was that group with the help of Republic Ombudsman. The main issue and the reason was not only to create the platform, but to establish the concept and the qualification of threats and pressures, especially pressures, because we realized that pressures actually produce much more negative consequences. For example, on CRIC, at some point, Stevan do not react on some huge threat, but he and his colleagues in CRIC would much more react regarding these smear campaigns and lawsuits and something like that. So we agreed with Republic Ombudsman to create platform, but we already have platforms. For example, NUNS has Safe Journalist platform and have other platform regarding the different qualification of cases, and we already have thousands of cases there. And all of them are, you know, like publicly opened, and everyone can see. But Ombudsman wanted to have his own platform. But we agreed with him to realize, for example, what is SLAPP. If at that point we didn't have, for example, directive. We only had some like internal things which would help us to realize. On the other hand, we had verdicts of European Court, actually, some Serbian verdicts. So we agreed with him to realize not only slaps, other types of important pressures. And when we establish this kind of platform and create the qualification of threats and pressures, everything stopped. Ombudsman didn't want to work. Actually, the problem was, the most important problem was the case directly not involved by influenced on Greek, when, for example, pro-government tabloids started to write how Greek was actually financed by very dangerous, and at that moment he was under arrest actually at that moment. Veljko Belivuk, yeah. I think it's not only in the regionally famous. I think the New York Times wrote about him, and then the other important medias and journalists wrote actually, but they were actually writing, and they made the kind of connection, financial connection with Greek, Belivuk and Greek, and it was actually a huge influence, a huge negative consequences on Greek. After that, Greek received so many insults, so many threats and connections. People actually were pretty much confused. Some of them were really mentioned that Greek is really financed by it. So we decided not to work anymore with Ombudsman, because that was only one case. He actually refused to act in few, I don't know, dozen of cases. So we realized that the main reason why we actually gather in that kind of group to find the reasons and solutions, potential solutions for pressures and slaps as a part of these pressures, actually not exist anymore. So practice doesn't working. But on the other hand, we succeeded that a Republic Ombudsman recognized the slap. Technically, he recognized it. He was very aware that it is happening. What is that? We actually spoke about it. We even have not definitions, but have some explanations what slap actually is. And as a result, the other groups, especially this permanent working group, also accepted this kind of, I can say, not definition, but recognition of the slaps. Even their prosecutors and police officers, they're not pretty much connected with slaps, but when you talk with them about slap as a pressure, they recognize it. They understand that it's a kind of entry regarding the much harder threats and attacks, especially physical attacks. So finally we realized as a result that we need to go in public. We need to explain to the ordinary citizen what is actually slap. We need to write about it. We need to publish. We need always to mention that Ombudsman recognized that, for example, Commissioner for the Protection of Personal Data and Public Information, Freedom of Information, also recognized it. That, for example, few prosecutors, not only few prosecutors from Permanent Working Group, also recognize it. For us, at this moment in Serbia, it's always need to be public as much as possible.
So going public as a kind of a...
Yes, still the biggest tool against the slap. To finish with this.
Thank you so much. Perhaps any other idea for best tools of counteracting the threats and pressures, and then we will get to getting some questions from the audience.
No, I can just argue with the same. So publicity means, but somehow sometimes it's a grotesque situation that you cannot. Analysts said these cases can be won at least at the ECGR, but we will see.
So we are ready to take some questions from the audience. Questions, comments.
Also for the keynotes, there were some questions which we didn't have time to accommodate. So if you have any questions also to our keynote speakers.
Hi, my name is Flutur Alkosari. I represent ECPMF. I have a question for Rade. We're talking now about the new instruments and standards on anti-SLAPP. We have the recommendation of Council of Europe, the recommendation of EU, and the EU directive. The question is, do you think there is political will in Serbia to start the implementation of such standards? And if so, how is this practically done? Is it a specific ministry that is in charge? Is it the parliament? Is it the office of the prime minister? Thank you.
Well, actually, as I few times I actually mentioned, our government is, I have to say, authoritarian regime actually, but it's not classical. When I mention some specific European countries, we are, like looking how they actually work. It's, for example, Hungary. We always copy-paste some Hungary solutions, and what actually Orban did. For example, our colleague mentioned these lawsuits regarding the GDPR and publicly open at some specific private information, which is actually not true. All of these information you can easily find in some specific registries which are actually open. I think that there is no political will, general, if you don't press them. But when I say press them, it mostly regard on international organizations. Especially, they would react on European Parliament. They would especially react when Viola von Kramon say something, that Vučić is very angry on the other side, but he reacts. And they use that kind of opportunity to, like line of lesser resistance, something like that. They will use something, they will give us something, but they would probably switch. In that manner, it could be useful and for them. So technically they are open for some specific changes, but in their manner. And we always need to be very careful when we, introducing some specific changes, like I already mentioned regarding the first questions. I'm very worried when we introduce some specific criminal offense, especially regarding journalist safety, because we already have it. But regarding the practice, the president of the republic and the journalist, they're in the same position. They're similarly protected. But it only works when it matters of president. When it matters of journalist, nothing actually works. You won't have any kind of decent prosecution when they, I don't know, very dangerously threat to Stevan. On the other hand, simple tweet regarding the, potential, what it could be, is very easily very easily prosecuted when it matter of President Vučić or other high-ranked official, but especially President Vučić. So I think it is possible, but if you help us to pressure them, they will need to put something. On the other hand, they will try as matter as
Hello, my name is Marika Panadze. I'm from Georgia. Many thanks for your speeches. I also have a question regarding the Serbian situation, because I think that there are lots of similarities between Georgia and Serbia, which is, of course, unfortunate. But honestly, I was surprised when I hear that you have won one of the SLAPP cases in the Serbian judiciary system, and I wanted to hear more about the approach of the judges when it comes to the SLAPP cases, whether it is only one such case or whether there are some more likelihood to win some cases, because in Georgia we have a very sad experience that all of those cases we have lost, sadly. Thank you.
But I can talk about maybe a Greek case in Serbia. Rade has wider perspective, but it really depends on the judge. So let's say this ratio, like if you take, we had in last 2 years, we have, I think 13, 14 lawsuits, something like that. So the ratio is next. If you look the first instance verdicts, we won 1 and 3 we lost. So still not perfect ratio. But there is still some of good judges, but there's less of these judges over the time. So if you get back, like I took this as CRIC is founded in 2015, and before we have till 2021 we had 8 cases. I think all of these cases we won basically. But then there was a lot of reshuffling. The government was, because the government was slowly capturing the judiciary. So first they more care about, for instance, the court that deals with organized crime. So they have their own judges, they're not to their own people be prosecuted. So this court that deals with this kind of lawsuits was kind of maybe less on the kind of, or not the less, but actually when the SLAPPs become actually popular, which was around 2021, when we start, that becomes as a measure, I think then government get more interested for this court. So the point is, first we were winning all the cases, and we were really naive. We believe in that time that good journalism will always save you. That was like very naive. So we say if it's our story, our fact check, good, like when we're giving our stories to lawyers to check, we were like, we were never can lose. But we were naive. But then the government started changing, so most of these judges are actually changed, unfortunately. And as time going past, I think more and more we will lose, unfortunately. So that's not to be confused. Actually, it's going in, fortunately, in bad direction.
Well, maybe to add, as I mentioned, most of these lawsuits are regarding violation of reputation and honor, damage to the business reputation by publication of unauthorized information and false information, and especially in last year, it was regarding using private information or you know, like problems with GDPR. So technically, we have completely different types of understanding of judges. On the other hand, I didn't mention, we have certain judges who recognize journalist writing and investigative stories as a matter of public interest, actually. And they are very well explaining in their verdicts. On the other hand, you have judges who will, as I said, they will sue CRIC because they wrote about SLAPP article, you know, by SLAPP lawsuit. They understand it as a, you know, like a violation of reputation and honor of the plaintiff. And the plaintiff is actually, I don't know, Minister of Interior, who is one of the biggest plaintiffs in their case. Not.
Yes, and mention the biggest problem in Serbia, what the judges do, they also don't recognize these people as people who are basically working, who are public figures.
Public officials, yeah.
But like when they sue you, like we have ministers sue us, they consider it like private individual, so they will not decide from standpoint of view, you know, like that this person should actually be there to be criticized and stuff. So this element will not happen there. It's literally like somebody, you know, your neighbor sues. This is how they will see these cases, and yeah, they don't recognize SLAPP. That's also a problem.
And then technically, they do not even check the story, the facts actually that CRIC, for example, pointed in this story. It's true or not true? It's actually true. It's you know, like fact checked so many times. They do not care about this. They only measure the type of or amount of, you know, like mental pain you actually felt, something like that. So it's on the other hand, you have completely different and opposite verdicts in some almost similar cases. And technically, it depends on individual judge. And all of them are from High Court in Belgrade, actually. On the other hand, on appellation court, we have slightly better situation. These judges are, I can say, they are under the influence of the executive and high officials. They are calling them by names. They are, you know, like connecting them in some specific verdicts, in some specific cases of organized crime, actually. So they're threatening them. They're putting a kind of pressure on them. But most of them are very good judges, and at this point, few good judges and publicly opened information about the case That's the biggest strength we actually have.
Yeah, thanks. Simone Benazzo, Free University of Brussels. I have two questions. The first one is for like the entire panel. The second one is actually mostly for Matthew. So the first one is that basically most of you have emphasized the fact that SLAPPs give the opportunity actually to go public, and this is actually always like a tool to react to SLAPPs. But I think actually was Stevan or somebody else actually that said, yeah, in certain countries you can go public, whereas actually in other countries it's better not to. So I wonder, I mean, are there any cases where actually it would be better not to go public? Because actually my impression after listening to you is actually like going public is always like the go-to solution. So just actually if you could elaborate on that. The second question is actually addressed to Matthew. And I found it extremely insightful, the fact that you said that most journalists that you have gathered data on kind of feel ashamed about talking about SLAPPs, whereas actually you pointed out that the opposite should be true. Because actually the better journalists you produce, actually the more likely it is that you get targeted by SLAPPs. So I wonder, given also at the end of this actually day, we're going to talk about non-legal instruments to kind of react to SLAPPs. I wonder, shouldn't we try to kind of like steer the narrative, change the narrative? Basically actually telling journalists, actually making them aware that actually the opposite is true. Basically exactly what you said before. That the very simple fact that they were targeted by SLAPPs actually means something. Means actually that the work they're producing is valuable. I think actually when we speak about like initiative from civil society, this could be one potential step based on what you said before. I wonder what you think about it. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we will collect some of the questions because there are some more and we are almost running out of time. There was one more here and I'm going to the back with another mic.
Yes, my question was already partly answered by the end of your presentation just now, but I was wondering, because as you said, the pressure on judges themselves, and they're in a way, okay, apart from those who are co-opted, that partly they're in a similar situation like you. What can the international community do to support also the judges and together with the targets of SLAPPs, or maybe to bring some kind of a coalition, the judges in that movement?
Okay. Yeah. Hello, I'm Indra from Vilnius, from a public broadcaster, and I have a question to Janos. Actually, thank you very much for that GDPR aspect. It's a pain in the ass everywhere, I believe. But what is like a warning signal is that, you know, they use that for disclosing, I believe that official registers, yes, that information from the official registers. So can you specify particularly what kind of information was disclosed by the journalist? Because we hear the same signals from some businesses here in Lithuania as well. Like for example, we did investigation based on the data from Import Genius, and it was like, you know, kind of, you know, I heard rumors that they are going to sue us because, you know, it's our business information and we disclosed it. So, thank you.
I think there was one last here.
Dzień dobry, Rafał Górski.
Hello, Rafał Górski, Civic Affairs Institute. I've got a question to Malta. You mentioned that your mom had her bank accounts frozen, which reminds me of Lacary's story, Faithful Gardener. Keep cash on you is the advice when you fight against big business. We, the Civic Institute and Weekly Magazine, we have this Protect Cash campaign. When you speak about this broad scope perception of SLAPP, so your idea about currency protection, protecting us, journalists and activists, against SLAPPs?
I will summarize the question. The speaker was asking a question. He's from an organization which is dealing with actually protecting cash. So to what extent you think, and on the work of journalists, it's important to have cash and the protection of cash? And having the mic, I also would like to ask Janos to have a very one sentence on what do you think, what are the perspective or implementation of the EU directive in Hungary, and to what extent you think it will stick to the minimum, or there is any chance, relying, for instance, on the recommendation to go a little bit further than what is in the minimum in order to reply to the question of GDPR.
And if possible, let's stick to 1 minute answers, if possible. Okay.
I had two short questions. I think the prospect of implementing is, it really depends on how the government media will be subjected to this kind of SLAPP. So actually, likewise in the libel decriminalization stuff, if the government media feels that it is attacked by this kind of SLAPP, then I think there might be a prospect of implementing not just the minimum standards. And as to the data that was published, basically it was from company registry. The data was from company registry, but the court said that from a data perspective view, the open source nature of the data doesn't exempt you from observing the various requirements under the GDPR. So the court somehow took into consideration that, of course, this was an open source data, but it did not mean that the press could use it without these obligations. There was some data which was even mentioned in interviews by the Barabás family and other people, and even information said in an interview couldn't be handled as information of the general public, but it was a personal information according to the court.
Okay, question for me was regarding the possibilities, what actually international institutions can do, where for us it's very important to be recognizable in your reports, actually, to use our investigations, analyses, or reports we are actually already made. And all these reports need to be addressed to members of our government, to ask them to investigate if they think that there are individual cases, because actually we are always talking about these kind of pressures and intimidation of judges or prosecutors. But when you ask prosecutor, they will always say, no, I'm not under the pressure, I'm completely okay. But he's acting and his decisions are clearly showing that there is a huge pressure. And on the other hand, highly ranked officials, especially Prime Minister, President, need to condemn all these potential threats, pressures, attacks. In every day, I can't say every day, every few days, every week, you have a kind of campaign against some specific judge or specific prosecutor, and all those prosecutors, these prosecutors and judges are critically oriented when they speak about not only decisions, but not decisions, about acts of executive. They're always talking about pressures, and no one from government actually reacts. So for us, it's very important. They can hear from you there is a problem, that kind of problem really exists. I can't remember for whom is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I can respond to this on slap shaming, right? So yeah, that's an important case, because usually when they sue you, just the fact they sue you, they already try to present is that your journalism was wrong. Like they already warn you by suing you, and that's how basically also they show they are innocent, because they like, you know, if I'm something wrong, I'll never sue. And there is problem in media. It's basically that journalists tend to see themselves if being sued that they did something wrong. that was also happening to us, and especially when you lose a case. I mean, I know first time we lost, like on first instance case, it was really big shock for us. Even we knew at that time that this judge was pretty much politically tied, and we knew that kind of the case was rigged. Still, when you lose it, it's very bad. So that's like something that needs to be more dealt with, and in general, with media, that basically concept should not be anymore like before, because before in media concept was you provide good journalism, it's fact-checked, nobody can sue you, and that was, nowadays not anymore, everybody is suing, and submitting SLAPP so should not be bad. And I mean, there's one point we didn't address, we don't have time now, it's also a mental health issue, which is not so much addressed in the newsroom, which is also connected to the SLAPP and stuff, but I just want to finish with this about going public. So I always advocate for going public with SLAPP cases, and usually it depends. Like lawyers tend to mostly give arguments and advices not to go public. So usually we many times need to measure with our lawyers in different countries. So in some countries we didn't went public. It's kind of lawyers. Their idea was by seeing the judges, and they were kind of idea. They thought that judges were kind of more kind of by going public, we will basically more irritate judges, and which will not be in our favor. But in the end, the problem is still like the editors need to make this decision. So like lawyers, mostly they will decide no, go public. But in many cases, we go public, we actually won, not because what happened in courtroom, but with everything what we do in public. So my general advice is actually to always go public. That's the thing, you know. So in the end, they want to silence you. So it's really important to keep on doing stories on these guys. So this is also what we do in the sue us. We don't stop reporting on them. We continue to report to show they didn't silence us. But we also are vocal about cases, because that's the point, not to allow you to be silenced.
In the Maltese context, we didn't really have a choice, because for the exact reasons that you mentioned, the claimant would go ahead and circulate a press release saying that they filed the case. And this is what was like, they fired a shot at the journalist. My thinking is that this only sort of comes into play, or this is only done in a situation where the journalist has already been set up as public enemy number one. So in my mom's case, because of very intense propaganda, which was done by the party in government, she was set up as a scapegoat or a hate figure and so on. And that meant that when a case was filed against her, there would be a kind of pile-on, you know, with supporters of the government celebrating the fact that the case had been filed, because they knew what the lawsuit implied even before judgment, cost, waste of time, and so on. So they kind of celebrated that being done to the journalist. There was not a single case which didn't become public out of the many that were filed. In the Coalition Against SLAPPs in Europe, we offer a kind of middle ground, which is that we understand that that lawyers want to keep tight control over the case, and going public is a card that they might want to play at a certain point in time, but not necessarily at the beginning. So we still really encourage journalists, academics, activists, anyone who is sued for their public participation to get in touch with us, get in touch with the foundation, get in touch with case, tell us about what you're dealing with. That material that you provide on the case you're dealing with will feed into our advocacy, but in a way that can be anonymous. So I mentioned the statistics that we gather at the beginning. That is crucially important for our advocacy. If journalists hadn't come forward to tell us about the cases they're dealing with, we would have never been able to get the directive, because we had to show the evidence that this is a pan-European problem. We need to continue doing that, I mean, especially in the context of implementation. And we can do it without sort of having the name of the journalist or activist or whoever being made public.
We'll stop here. Thank you so very much. And well-deserved break is awaiting us, and then we'll continue with the next panel. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
We have a coffee break now. We will just ask you to convene and come back in 10 minutes sharp, because we have the streaming, which requires a little bit of timing and